Okay, good morning and welcome to our shutdown stream. I get the privilege of introducing myself because I'm running the stream as well. And, this is a good way of doing business. Committee of one works beautifully, and that's the way we should have it. But today is a chat about the role of organising the shuts before we start. And what I want to do is talk about two areas. We've got the planning side of things, and I'm not going to tell you how to plan or anything like that, but we've got the governance side of things. And if we can get planning and governance working together, we've got a slim chance of making things work. Now, as we know, our protagonists on the ground are hugely capable. They have a very in-depth knowledge of what we're fixing and that sort of thing. But they're not always supported by the planning function, and too often we get the late entries of work and that sort of stuff. So planning is the absolute beginning of the end to make sure this works. So what I want to do is talk about quickly on some shutdown overruns, but I'll get a feedback to you on the questions we should be asking before we start our shuts. So the commercial root causes of these sorts of issues are pretty well straightforward. So certainly there's common commercial failures that we know that's happening. And from my experience thus far is we don't treat risk with enough focus. Everything we do has risk, and the level of risk is a huge part of that. And the other part of it, from my experience, is we don't necessarily reflect on how the last shut went. And it's those sorts of things where our learnings are that the governance piece has got to ensure that the worker bees are indeed picking up the gold that they know about. And it's hugely important. Now, at this stage, what I want to do is I want to make this interactive. Anything that pops up, just throw a question out there, and what do you mean by that, Pete, or whatever. Happy to go down any sort of rabbit holes and turn this into an interactive session, because the experience in this room is huge. There's some seats down the front. Please don't be shy. There's plenty of room. Now, the other thing is the focus on what we did. Where were the costs appearing from? Where were the blowouts? Where were the unplanned decisions? And what did our shutdown teach us from the planning that we had in place? So why shutdowns overrun? First of all, we've got some basic problems with risk. We don't think about it. We don't measure too much. And critical planning decisions were made, and we have to understand and we've got to hold accountable for that process. The causal chain of overruns, and that comes things for, if you've got that ambiguity before you start and you have got people throwing jobs into the bucket at the last minute, you are destined for failure, as you well know. Then we make poor field decisions, and that's no reflection on the quality of the people on the ground. They open up something, they see something, they want to turn it into a mini shut within the shut and just start to fix that. Because I've got it shut down, I've got the isolations in place, I might as well fix all of this while I'm there. Oh shit, I haven't got the parts. So we go rushing around and we start to then make those poor field decisions. We get the congestion, and costs at this stage are escalating. And then if we don't embed these lessons learned, you can't be that effective team. And if we've got churn in our business, and as we know through the shuts teams that we have, so many different contractors coming through, different faces, and we have a real issue through that. So why shutdowns overrun? Any of that doesn't sit comfortably with you? We know why they overrun, don't we? Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And we've got to get to that stage where that's actually happening. So a simple shutdown cost equation. We can start to look at this, from first principles. And where do we get the value out of this from that perspective? So that line there, plan scope, rates and duration will give us a very clear indication of what we're doing. But look at the words that follow that. Plan scope, rates and duration, plus surprises, plus variations, plus inefficiency. All of that can be planned into our process or planned out of our processes if we do the work properly. Would you agree? Because the inefficiencies are built in through lack of planning. And then the scheduling, do not schedule unplanned work. Those are the sort of things we've got to have from the governance perspective of when we lock in that schedule, it is all planned work and I have all the bits. So the impact of unplanned decisions is serious. And it's from those, if we start compressing decisions in time and rushing, up goes the problems with safety. Risk increases. And we're trying to do things on the run, and we are in a very poor negotiating process from a commercial situation. So we're talking about simple cost equation. We know where the costs come from, but we want to quantify them. So governance enforces decisions. Governance enforces decisions. The rights and prevents informal scope. So if we don't get that scope right, we don't understand what we're doing, and we're not held accountable for that, we are losing integrity. But it's both the people on the ground who are involved in the planning and those who are overseeing it must work in harmony to get that going. And finally, your cost drivers are well beyond rates. The rates of people are a given. You've got those well known through your processes, but there are bigger cost multipliers than rates, and they must be costly. So the volatility and the durations that we increase is where those costs come from. If we've got our plan, we know how many hot, sweaty bodies, we know the rates they're going to have, we've got a cost of what's happening. But then if we start variations to the scope of work, boom, up goes the costs. So the next one is, there's two cohorts, as I've said. There's the practitioner, and lots of us been playing in this pool for a long time, and we've been in, whether it's fixed plant, mobile plant, distributed assets, or in an area where we're manufacturing. There's all sorts of different areas which we are focused on and we know and love. And I'll have, I do a lot of teaching of planning and scheduling, and I'll have somebody in the room who's just totally focused on mobile. Pete, you didn't teach any about mobile. What you're teaching is wrong. And what we've got to do is we've got to bring them out of the and look at the process big picture, because it doesn't matter what area of work you're in, the process is the same. And if we think about that, and we then might put it on a fleet of trucks, or then we put it on a fixed plant, or then we put it on a different area. So these two cohorts, that defining the practitioner's controls, what can they do while they're on the ground, and then the governance levers of how they can be supportive and not giving you a hard time. So the practitioner's role and controls, we want to give them their head. We want to trust them. We want to let them make decisions, but we have to prepare them for those sort of situations. So if we got, pardon me, if we've got that planning integrity in place and we trust the people we're doing, but we also do an audit on the process, we work out what our strategic plan is and that sort of stuff, we start to manage informal execution decisions. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more on that in a minute. So then the governance responsibilities, those who are leading us, have got to be involved with the process. So governance sets the boundary conditions to sustain discipline. Governance sets the boundary conditions to sustain discipline. What does that mean to you? How many people have got their shutdown manual and they've read it thoroughly? Not a chance, right? Looked at your work management manual? Not a chance, right? Why don't we do that sort of stuff? We've got a set of rules, but what we're doing is we're doing work as we come. So governance sets the boundary conditions to sustain discipline. And that comes down to your cost approval. It comes down to your escalation enforcement and that sort of stuff. Thanks very much, Val. So role clarity is a huge process to be understood. Too often I see the planners racing through the plan process because they've been involved with the day-to-day stuff. Then they picked up the shutdown planning too late, and by the way, we're going to put you into a coordination role after that. We do that continually to absolutely mess up A, their heads, and B, their focus. We've got to stop doing that. So clear roles, approval pathways, prevent discipline failures. And so we've got to have the shared vocabulary. Like most things, when we're talking about the C-suite, we've got to turn our technical detail into a dollar value. What is the return on investment of doing this extra job? Why is this going to cost so much? The boss wants to know the dollars. We want to know the technical aspects of turning the spanner in the right way to do the job. So these two cohorts have to work together. And when you finish, I want you to grab a copy of this, which is the commercial check-off list and the cohort for the C-suite to start thinking about that as a handout to take away. So the practitioner controls, us who do the work, we want to protect the integrity of the plan. That means our plan has to have respect. Now, how often, put your hand up, that we don't respect the plan? So tell me, why is that? Why don't we respect the plan?
Well, I got a planner that says the plan's a guide, not. So they don't understand it.
Yeah.
The relationship.
And how do we set our planners up for success? Yeah, you've just broken your leg at footy. Yeah, you're on light duties. You're a planner now for a little while. What do you want me to do? Some of that planning shit. And quick as a flash, we set them up for failure. So that is a governance problem. That's where we've got to say, why do we have planners? Who's got a policy for the distribution of planners in their business? Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, their roles and responsibilities, what they're supposed to do, shutdowns, the cadence of what they do week to week between frequency of shutdowns, the weekly planners that have the same, what they do on a day-to-day basis or on a weekly, during weekly duration.
And that's not too complex, is it? What do you do daily? What do you do weekly? So if I'm the planner, what I do on Monday, what I do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they are known have-tos and that process. So that's where we want to protect the integrity of the plan. So what I'm thinking about is, if I want to set these people up, I want to have some interactive sessions. So before we go into the shut, I want to sit down with my team and I want them to start triaging emergent work, in theory. So I sit them down with all my supervisors and my planners, and I come up with a scenario saying, what if this happened? What would we do? And then 3 or 4 people get up, well, I do this, I do that, I do this. And then we start to talk to them about how are you going to make those decisions in the heat of battle. And if we don't work with those guys to role play through the process before we start, and as you know, you race into the shut, Monday morning, 7 o'clock, 27 people are trying to get their lock boxes on, and you haven't got enough people around, and some of them are starting at about midday before they get going. But we've got to think about, when I open up something and I find that oh shit moment, what am I going to do about that? So let's start to think about triaging emergent work as a task, and the decision-making processes then gets through their thinking. But then we have the approval process. So is it a shut-related job? Do I have to do it now? No, I don't. Get on with business. but do not lose that focus. Get it into the system. But what are the authorities? What are the critical paths? And we got to let them know what the critical part is. Common failure, identify failures includes scope creep. You wouldn't have any scope creep in your shuts, would you? Not a chance, right? Yes, very well done. Scope creep for discretionary work. We don't want to have discretionary work if indeed it's an issue. Unjustified extra labour and unclear risk ownership. It always comes back to risk. And then effective emergent work control. I want to have that governance and that discipline to hold these people accountable. Not in a way that is the big stick and giving them a hard time. I want to respect the people with whom I work, and I want to set them up for success. And they've got a fair bit of work to do there. So then, controlling the overmanning. Too often we have a few extras just there, just in case, because if I open this up, it's probably a marginal cost of having them sitting there doing nothing is a lot better than actually planning properly and understanding what the labour's going to do. So why do we think about this, or why don't we think about this properly? Workforce numbers must be justified task by task. Planning is about the hundreds of tasks in each work order, and then hundreds of work orders which are concatenated together in a schedule. Once the schedule is in place, we then can understand how many hot, sweaty bodies we need. I need 27 fitters, 14 electricians, 5 boiler makers. And they must be there task by task, clear explanation for the crew. And by the way, I can then filter the Gantt chart and look at all the, say, scaffs. And I see that on Monday I'm trying to build 27 scaffs on the Monday morning. And quickly I start to move all of that. All of that can be rationalised long before we get moving. We want to stagger that mobilisation. You don't need everybody on site day one. There's a whole process where you move up, and there's a reason your S-curve is the state it is, because you build up as you go, you work like shit at the fast pace, and then you taper off. That's what we should be doing with our people, bringing them in, and certainly those who disappear after a while, we want to make sure we get all their feedback from them before they disappear. So that staggered mobilisation controls the contractor overmanning. There was a day where the contractor would put the hut on the site and stay there as long as they can and milk it for everything. Those days are gone long ago. So no work back, no work, and we've got to make sure we tie the approved tasks. And we want to start to look at the productivity on a daily basis, hourly basis, shift basis, whatever it is, because that's what our schedule has given us. We've done the planning, that's produced the schedule, that's given us the critical path, so we know what ones to focus on based on risk, and that's where we have to work. So the governance control. So we of the worker fraternity are looking at all of those other jobs, and we're being set up for success. So again, some form of interactive drills before we start. So if I'm the maintenance manager or I'm the GM of the site, I want to spend some time with these people to understand of what's going to prevent scope volatility. And so I might set up again some scenarios beforehand. So things like, what is the proposed capital inclusion? What is the, do we need to have the plant on or off? Is this actually a shut item? Commercial risk, governance gate, decision. And start to have a scenario work process with these people so we can then say, if we're going to upgrade this non-critical guard, do we need it off? Blah, 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 defer it. And that, when you start to talk to your teams and you talk about the decision-making processes, they start to get these scenarios. And then you get them to bring in scenarios to you. So we're preparing them for that process in these interactive drills before we get on site. And we've got to slow down the rate at which we attack these things. So duration compression as a primary commercial lever. Now, I'm not here to say do more with less. And you know the old story, I need 27 hours to do this, or I need 3 weeks. You've got 2, see how you go, mate. We want to all look at compressing the schedule through well-organised, planned, scheduled work with the right skill that's ready to go. So aligning planning and governance to shorten the outage is not about taking time away, because those operational brethren who we love our operators, don't we? They're beautiful people. We're going to work with them. But what we want to do is we want to say, this is how long it's going to take. We don't want to give it back early. We don't want to give it back late. We want to give it back when we said we're going to do it. So scope discipline, critical path clarity, resource fit optimisation. So balanced view, sizing avoids bottlenecks. We've got to make sure that we get the crews that we need, and then readiness preparation. So duration compression as a primary commercial lever decreased costs because we got our shit together. We've got our guano in one little lump because we planned and scheduled well. So 6 non-negotiables. So let's check on them. Review and embed the lessons learned. First thing we must do. What happened last time? First of all, what went well? Once we know what went well, we want more of that. What are our opportunities for improvement? And let's embed those lessons. Because if you don't start your shut with the last report, you are letting a whole lot of information out. And you've got to collect that information. You've got to be ruthless with collecting it. Shutdown risk register. The risk register has to be alive and people reading it and understanding it. We've got to explain it to people. What are our high process risks? What are our lower risks? And that risk register must be alive, existing, and covering the work that we're doing. It's huge importance of getting the non-negotiables in place. Now, separate maintenance and capital scope. I'm going to take you through an example because we talk about business as usual. We've got the design of an item, which we know that we have to grease at certain times. We know we have to change things at certain times. We've got their planned maintenance and we know what's happening. But of course, the age of those parts and as it goes through is a huge information area where we must collect more data. So we want to separate business as usual, the basic maintenance, and then we have to understand the capital scopes that are coming in. I'll use an example in a minute. Operational readiness is confirmed. So long before we're going to start the shut, we want to have a very clear idea of how we're going to test it. Too often I've gone into the finish the roll, going to flash it up again. There's no documentation of how we should test it and do it properly. All of that has to be very clear before we start. Going back to our analysis of or running a few programs, emergent work must have very clear criteria. Do I have to do it now or not? And then daily commercial control, review the costs to complete. We already know how much it's going to cost, the number of jobs, multiplied by the time, multiplied by the cost, gives you, if you get those from your plan and they come in on time, that's 100% overall shutdown effectiveness. But if any one of those change, and because they're multiplied together, your overall shutdown effectiveness decreases substantially. So let me take you through a little example. In my previous life as the engineer on the Collins-class submarine, there is an asset. So this asset was bought and built. It's going to operate for 12 years, 10 years in operation, 2 years major refit. We're going to have 4 intermediate dockings, 2 intermediate IDs and a mid-cycle docking in the middle. All of that was based on the design. So I don't care whether it's a fixed plant, your mobile, a drill rig or whatever, the design gives you the information that you must have. And this is where I talk about business as usual. So in that 12 years, the idea of the life cycle of that item is 3 cycles. So 36 years, end of life, move it on. Now, of course, when we start to develop that, so if I think here from their maintenance time 0, the brand new submarine was just put in the water, through to the first 12 years, I can work out exactly what I need to do at different times. Now, as an example, in this mid-cycle refit here, which is basically a year, I'm going to change the battery. I've got 6 submarines, I've got 36 years of each of them, and I've got a battery manufacturer who I go and talk to and say, I need to have these batteries at these times, at this stuff. I can save it's a technical term, a shitload of money by ordering those batteries in a way which the manufacturer can set up and provide to me. So we have a very clear understanding of what's happening. But if you go to the local news, the Collins-class submarines are going to go for another long refit to continue their life, long before we get the nuclear boats. So that standard routine is going to change because the capital programs, because they're going to cut off the end, they're going to put new propulsion, a whole lot of new stuff. And so your business as usual through your capital program is going to change. And that's where you have to be really nimble in keeping business as usual, plus capital projects, plus all those little things that come up when you get obsolescence and other sorts of things. So to close out, one action, one owner, one shut, the protagonists who are doing the work, who we respect deeply, the teams who are doing the governance for us, respect those teams and set standards. They audit process before it starts and give them a very clear guidance of what's happening. So we have commitment to action. The participants assigned to implement the job. They are professionals, they get in there and do the work, and the planning is done properly. We have governance discipline because they set up properly for it, and they hold people accountable against a job description that they're being given. How many of you can go and pick up your job description now and say, that is exactly what I do? Not a chance, right? Not a show in shit. So if I said to you, what's your job? And you told me, then I said to you, you work for this young lady. What does she do? And you tell me. Then you're the boss. What does she do? All three of you tell me exactly the same thing, don't you? Not a chance in the world. So that whole governance discipline, what is the planner's role? What is the scheduler's role? What is the coordinator's role? What is the other roles of safety and things? And then we've got to have the operational courage. Successful shutdowns require courage to challenge plans early and resist last-minute changes under pressure. And if we've done that work up front and scenario work on things like the scope challenge with emergent work or decision-making of why we would accept something into the process, we need to make sure that that's part of our living. And then checklists are activated as living tools to reduce the value leakage and improve the planning. So that's where I want to finish it. What I've got here, if you want to pick it up, is 2 areas. Commercial controls, which is a set of ideas that you can think about, and the other part is the C-suite briefing note of what the people from the governance side of things. Just a check-off list of things to think about. And so if we don't get those 2 groups working together, our bosses trusting us, supporting us, and understanding what we do, we're going to continue to go through other processes. Any questions? Well, your shot's perfect. So why are you in this room? Anybody? Yeah, and that's the beauty. I opened up the session where working with these guys, we used to have a shutdown conference up in Brisbane, and went up there with a group from a refinery, and everybody came into these sort of sessions, picked up a whole lot of notes, then went back and had a chat, went back out, listened to the next round, come back together, and just picked up all of the gold that was floating around. And then when we got back to site, we had to sing for our supper, and we had to then, what did we get out of the shutdown conference that we can implement now? And that is what the world's about. From the opening this morning, as they said, let's pick up the gold, let's talk to the people that we can talk about, make connections and keep talking. Got to be a question somewhere.
Peter, one of your slides you had stuff about to stop your overruns. One of the key things was protecting the plan and protecting the schedule through not bringing work in after scope freeze or schedule acceptance. How do you advise that happens, or what's your thoughts on?
So the process of locking schedule happens, I would hope, weeks out, and you enter a new phase, which is accepting new work. So I'm a realist, it's always going to come in, and so we have to do is say, if that new work comes in, am I going to kick something out? Am I going to, it's either more time, more dollars, or whatever it is, but then I go through a process of adding and subtracting to a point where I got the ability to get it into the schedule. But if it's not well planned, and somebody's come in late, we tell them the Foxtrot Oscar in the nicest possible way.
We've got a sort of a break-in, break-out process after like scope freeze at T-6. With this break-in, break-out process, it starts with planner and then goes up to the maintenance management for approval of this work getting broken in. But some work we get so much sort of break-in that it's just too much to manage. If you've got sort of some advice to sort of.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm so strong on the final report that you finish that shut, because you've been into everything, you've looked at everything, you know what's wrong, and your engineering expertise will tell you, I know how this machine works, I want to know what is the worst case scenario, best case scenario. If I have a couple of extra parts ready on site for that eventuality, so be it. But I want to anticipate that, and I have the expertise. But what we do is we work people so fast and hard that they don't have time to sit back and think about that. And so if I go back to my submarine analogy, I know every single one of those dockings, the 60% of what I'm going to do in there, I lock that away, bagged and tagged, ready to go, months ahead, and my job is about adding corrective work amongst that in the most efficient way. And so that's why it's that anticipation and the engineering expertise we have. They know how to do this stuff. They've just never given the support or the timing. You get the width out and then you get the blame down.
They're normally the ones breaking all the work in.
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard to look cool if you're you're the CEO and you're bringing stuff in just because I said, well, we're going to work somewhere else.
With the, so I suppose the sub one, when you're bringing in the capital work, would that still align with your periods of the normal maintenance work, and then you just work around it? So you can do both at the same time, or are you pulling it out?
No, remember your capital work comes from a 10-year plan. And that's where we've got to come up with that. We've got the capital works, because if I'm the CFO and I'm going to get money to put capital work in place, I want to know what's coming up. So you've got a 10-year plan, you've got a 5-year plan, you've got a 3-year plan. This bullshit about 1 year of capital work and I get it approved in August, then I start planning in September. By the time I get to the end of the year, I've got no chance of having that planned properly, and then we throw it into the bucket. We've got to get away from that, we've got to come to the capital plan, and you enter that into the long term. Thank you so much for your time. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.